Should you be having oats, dairy, and eggs for breakfast? Breakfast foods in recent years have taken an absolute hit. First it was eggs, now dairy, now oats. They're all meant to have these health benefits, but now, depending on how you eat them, there are potentially disadvantages as well, whether it's blood sugar or blood fats. So I'm going to go through all of them, starting off with oats, and give you the evidence base around their disadvantages and advantages so you can be empowered as to whether you want to include them in the start to your day every day. Oats, they are a satisfying staple breakfast, but they're also known to cause blood sugar spikes. So are oats a healthy breakfast? Well, let's look at the epidemiological and interventional studies showing that having oats in your diet may improve your cholesterol levels. There was a meta-analysis of 74 randomized controlled trials that found out that giving people a daily serving of oats in the form of oat bran meal or porridge lowered BMI, so a measure of weight, not a great one, but lowered BMI, and also lowered total and low density lipoprotein cholesterol. They've also been showed to lower your risk of heart disease by adding to your total intake of whole grains. There was a meta-analysis of observational studies that found that a high intake of 3 to 5 servings of whole grains per day, including oats, but also others like brown rice and wheat and barley, was shown to have a 21% reduced risk of heart disease as well. And that was in the Journal of Nutrition in 2012. And it's also obviously been shown to improve your gut microbiota. Multiple studies have shown that oat intake can increase beneficial bacteria in participants' guts, including lactobacilli and bifidobacteria, and increased concentrations of those short-chain fatty acids that are produced by those different microbes. But why would this be the case, particularly as oats is just having such a bad PR moment right now? Well, oats are rich in something called soluble fibers. These are especially a type of fiber called beta-glucan. And beta-glucan can help lower cholesterol levels and slow down the absorption of glucose, sugar, into the bloodstream and keep you feeling fuller for longer. The reason why it can do that is because of oats' ability to form viscous gels in the intestine. So what this beta-glucan does in particular is it forms this jelly-like substance coating the inside of your intestines and slows the absorption of that sugar, so you're not getting this blood sugar spike. That is the theory. But obviously, depending on the individual, as we'll get to in a second, it can be different. There are many other beneficial effects, including binding bile acids and increasing their excretion, which is why it has this lowering effect on cholesterol, and also delaying gastric emptying, which can further prevent these sharp rises in blood sugar and insulin levels after eating a meal. In addition, oats are actually full of things like phytochemicals and antioxidants. They have anti-inflammatory effects. There are phytosterols, which again have that lowering effect on lipoproteins. They have flavonoids. You wouldn't think it. If you look at oats, they're beige and they look pretty boring. They actually do have flavonoids in, similar to greens and vegetables, different ones, but still containing flavonoids. And they also have vitamins and B vitamins, magnesium, phosphorus. They're actually really, really packed full of nutrients. But it depends on what you compare oats with. So studies usually compare oats in two contexts: adding oats in a usual diet or comparing with another food. But some compare oats with refined grains like white rice and bread. It's sort of like comparing your whole food, plant-based vegan diet with the standard American diet. You're setting up to win, really. They're still quite a high carb food. So they might be more beneficial in the context of a substitution, i.e. swapping out a refined grain breakfast, but they're not necessarily going to be the best out of all the different options that you might have. That's the theory anyway. Here's the catch. Not all oats are created equal, and it's very hard to tease out in a lot of these studies what oats they were even using, the brands they used, the context in which these oats were consumed, the impact of whether they were using skimmed milk or whole milk. It's a really confusing field, just like the whole arena of nutritional medicine. Oats exist in what I call the oat spectrum. So on one end, you've got less processed versions of oats that have only been roughly chopped into small pieces. These are called steel cut oats for our American friends. They're also called Irish oats for our Irish friends, or pinhead oats. And they retain a lot of their structural integrity and contain the most intact fiber. They tend to be thicker and they have a coarser texture as well. And for the folks watching on YouTube, if you look at this diagram over here, it will show you the sort of life cycle of an oat plant into eventually whether it becomes a steel cut oat grain or something else. Moving along this oat spectrum, you'll find rolled oats, where the whole oat groats are steamed and then they're flattened with rollers to create flakes. So these are quicker cooking, but you can tell they're slightly more processed than your steel cut oats on this side over here. And at the far other end, you got instant quick oats, which are touted to be healthy. If you look at the packaging, source of fiber, source of minerals, lowers cholesterol, because unfortunately the umbrella term of oats has been given this whole health halo. Whereas in reality, oats are very different. It's like giving a free rein to all different types of rice, where on one side you've got white polished rice, on the other side you've got black Venus rice. Very, very different nutritionally and very, very different when it comes to looking at the health outcomes. So at this far end, where you've got the instant and quick oats, these have been steamed, they've been rolled even flatter to create a softer texture and shorter cooking time. Sometimes they're also served in packets with added sugar and flavorings as well, just in case you weren't getting enough starch. They've got more in it just to increase that sort of sweetness that we've become so accustomed to, particularly in the Western world. And what the research shows is that when you consume minimally processed thick oat flakes, this can improve blood glucose and insulin responses compared to refined grains. But thin, quick, instant oat flakes cannot. And there's a really big difference. And unfortunately, most people do not know how to tell the difference between them. Because let's be honest, when you're in the supermarket and you're perusing the aisles of the cereals and all the rest of it, and you see these wonderful images of harvest and oat flakes floating in the Irish wind, you just think you're getting the good stuff. You're not. You're getting probably the stuff that is very, very instant. And look, if you can pour hot water into your oats and wait 2 minutes and it's ready, that is not the type of oats that are going to be responsible for the potential health benefits. It is the steel cut oats and the pinheads. They take time, and a really good way of not only improving the bioavailability of the nutrients that you find in oats, but also reducing the cooking time, is to soak it overnight. We spoke with Karen O'Donoghue a few weeks back on the podcast about sprouting and soaking. And I really do agree. I'm seeing it happen. I'm seeing this pattern in a lot of different foods. The more you soak, the more you sprout, the more you germinate, the more you're going to get from the ingredients that you're using, whether that's nuts, seeds, grains. Soak and sprouting is definitely the way forward. And for steel cut oats, that's definitely something that I would recommend as well. Highly processed oats, less effective at reducing serum cholesterol, even if they have any effect whatsoever. And again, if you look at that diagram that I pointed to on YouTube, you'll be able to tell the difference, and you'll understand it's pretty obvious as to why the lower end of the spectrum is going to be much worse off than the better end of the spectrum, the steel cut oats and the pinhead and the Irish oats as well. So my top tip for choosing the healthiest way to eat oats is, number one, choose the less processed oats for better blood sugar control. All the oats will have similar amounts of fiber and carbs and nutrients on the label, but the effects on the body are very different because of the food matrix. We've spoken on this podcast with many different researchers about that food matrix. And so the disruption to that food matrix by processing is going to completely change the bioavailability of those nutrients, but also it's going to lead to a quicker absorption of the starches that you find in many foods, including oats as well. So look for the thicker, coarser flakes that take longer to cook, that's a good sign. Like I said, in the kitchen, those thicker oats, no, I've really taken to enjoying the texture of them. They do take longer to cook. So just remember to pre-soak them or make them overnight if you're in a hurry as well. Number two, when you're eating oats, if you choose to eat oats, I'm not saying you have to eat oats. If you don't enjoy oats, that's totally fine. But if you are going to eat oats, add protein and add even more fiber-rich toppings to make it filling and help regulate those blood sugar levels, because what you're doing is you are making the food matrix that more complex as well. So rather than just making plain oats with a bit of honey or a banana, so it's starch and sugar, and add a dollop of Greek yogurt, add hemp seeds, add chia. Make sure you soak your chia overnight. You don't want to have those a lot of people suffer bloating by eating chia raw, and it kind of grates me when I see people, particularly on Instagram, just sprinkling chia seeds that are raw onto your porridge. You have to soak chia seeds because it can cause digestive upset. But adding that to your oats, making sure they're soaked overnight, adding a handful of nuts or a spoonful of nut butter, go for the crunchy one. High fiber fruits like berries, apple, kiwi. This introduces complexity into your bowl of oats, and that's what is going to lessen the blood sugar spike as well, and ensure that you're getting other nutrients as well. You're getting that variety, you're getting that diversity, and that's why I'm a big fan of diversity bowls in general as well. So rather than lots of sugar or honey, add those other flavor elements, those other textural elements as well. And the other thing actually is the use of spices, so cinnamon and nutmeg. There is some evidence that it can also improve the regulation of blood sugar as well. Cacao nibs, these are all different ways in which you can increase the complexity of the dish that you're consuming. Another thing that I've been experimenting with, or I have actually experimented with in the past as well, is savory oats. So stock, mushrooms, kale. Sounds a bit weird to people, but actually they are delicious. It's similar to like a risotto, or adding nutritional yeast, mixed seeds, and egg. These things, we'll get to eggs in a minute. Well, these things are fantastic elements to add to a bowl of savory oats. And again, you're doing the same thing. You're adding that diverse complexity to your food matrix, which is your plate, and it helps with the absorption of the sugars, keeps you fuller for longer, prolonging satiety with that high protein level as well. And my third tip is mix it up. See what works for you. If you're not a fan of oats, like I said, you don't need to go for oats. But having oats every single day, I think, is also not the correct strategy. You want to go for diversity. It's a classic go-to, but mix up your breakfast in the mornings with other options, whether it's something like a chia or a yogurt parfait or loads of other seeds and nuts or leftovers. I'm a big fan of leftovers. So try savory breakfast. I think it's a really good way, but I wouldn't be fearful of oats, but I would be mindful about the quality of oats that you are consuming. Eggs, another highly debated food in the nutrition world, mainly because they are naturally containing cholesterol. Just a quick one. If you're enjoying this content, you will love my mini series on inflammation. I go through the different types of foods that you should be having, what inflammation actually is, plus lifestyle practices to reduce inflammation. You can get it for free right now in the link in the caption below. Back to the podcast. So eggs, are they a healthy breakfast? Well, eggs can be considered healthy if you look at the valuable sources of nutrition that they contain. So the first thing is protein. They contain all 9 essential amino acids. So a large egg will provide 6 grams of protein, looking at USDA guidelines. Lipids, so the egg yolk fat is mainly oleic acid, which is a monounsaturated fatty acid. It does have some saturated fats as well, some PUFAs, or polyunsaturated fatty acids. Nutrients and carotenoids, so it's actually an important source of choline and contains high levels of carotenoids, particularly lutein and zeaxanthin, which may have benefits against inflammation and oxidation. And they also contain vitamins like A, D, E, thiamine, riboflavin. It's no wonder that it was regarded as sort of like the original superfood. But there is an uncomfortable fact, and that fact is that eggs contain a notable amount of cholesterol, about 180 milligrams per large egg, which gave rise to some concerns about heart health, particularly in an era where we had this cholesterol heart health hypothesis. So, are eggs bad for cholesterol and heart health? Overall, observational studies looking at egg consumption do not generally show an increased risk of cardiovascular disease. There was a recent meta-analysis of observational studies published in the European Journal of Nutrition that concluded there is no conclusive evidence on the role of eggs in the risk of cardiovascular disease. If you look at the diagram that I'll pull up for the folks watching on YouTube, you'll see it is a really weird sort of diagram, which in some cases shows neutral or no effects whatsoever. In some cases shows benefit, to looking at strokes, for example. And heart failure, it looks like if you have more than 2 or 3 a week, it's not good for you. So my general approach is a pragmatic approach, which is moderation. I don't think eggs get a free ride because I think there's still a lot of unknowns. There is some evidence that eating less than 1 to 1.5 eggs per day doesn't risk at all the risk of all-cause mortality, whereas each additional egg per day is potentially associated with a higher risk of death from all-cause cardiovascular disease and cancer. And this is looking at a nutrition review in 2022. Again, I will put that up for the folks watching on YouTube. But again, you'll see that looking at the hazards ratio and the relative risks of egg consumption, it's so hard to tell. And we are dealing with the least useful of information, epidemiological data. There's so much bias, there's healthy user bias. And I get there's so many ways in which you can slice and splice the data to make it slightly more accurate. But unfortunately, we are dealing with quite dirty information, for want of a better word. It's never going to be clean cut. And I think you have to personalize the decision as to whether you eat eggs at all or have minimal amounts of eggs per week, or you're comfortable with having 2 or 3 every single day on the individual and their unique set of circumstances. With the impact and with the mixed evidence around the effects of eggs on health, my pragmatic opinion is that we should be going for 1 to 1.5 per day. So that's around 7 eggs per week at a maximum. But it does appear that people are roughly able to maintain LDL cholesterol levels in response to dietary cholesterol intake from eggs. But some people might want to limit their egg intake for those who already have high cholesterol. You will have noticed in a previous episode where I talked about cholesterol at length, I suggested that people who were trying to reduce their LDL cholesterol remove eggs from their diet, and I stand by that as well. So if you are someone who has had an event already, like a heart attack or a stroke, and you do have elevated levels of cholesterol, I would recommend removing eggs from your diet and retesting your cholesterol levels. This opens up another argument about whether we should be even looking at LDL cholesterol as a marker of cardiovascular disease. I think looking at most recent studies, particularly Mendelian randomization studies, where they look at the general picture of high levels of LDL and low levels of LDL in the population without taking any drugs at all, there is a clear trend to more likelihood of cardiovascular events with a high level of LDL cholesterol versus low levels. That for me is enough proof of the fact that LDL cholesterol is causative of cardiovascular disease. I'm happy to be proven otherwise, but I think with that pragmatic approach, you'd want to reduce your egg intake to 0 if you're looking to reduce your cholesterol. But again, depends on your individual needs. There are potentially ways to make eggs a healthy part of your diet if you're not worried about your cholesterol levels at the moment. Tip number 1, diversify your breakfast and stick to less than 7 eggs per week. That is my pragmatic approach. That is what I preach myself. So some days I'll be having 2 eggs for breakfast. The other day I'll have tofu scramble. Another day I'll have leftovers with maybe some anchovies. Another day I'll have oats. I am the diversity king. And I want you to be diversity kings and queens yourself as well. So don't have the same breakfast every single day. Mix it up. We are at an amazing part of the human timeline right now where we have access to all these different foods. There's no reason why you should be having the same food every single day, particularly as one as controversial as eggs as well. They're a great source of protein and essential nutrients, but the ideal seems to be around 7 eggs per week. And this encourages us and me to mix up the breakfast as well. The second thing to keep an eye on is the diversity of all your breakfasts, one thing, but also where you're getting saturated fats, particularly those high in saturated fats in your diet as well, which can, like I said, raise LDL cholesterol in your blood. That's because most of the cholesterol in your body does not come from your diet, but it's actually made by your liver, and saturated fat in the diet can cause your liver to make lots more cholesterol. So certainly eggs and bacon and other animal-based products that are high in certain types of saturated fat can overall lead to a high burden of cholesterol. So in that context, I would say you'd want to make sure that you're not having lots of other saturated fats in your diet, in addition to eggs that are high in cholesterol as well. So make sure you're mixing it up. And if you want to keep eggs as part of your diet, make sure you're diversifying your other sources of protein as well, and you're not having too many foods that are high in saturated fats. My third tip is to pair eggs with foods that are rich in fiber and other plant-based proteins. So similar to point 2, making sure you're not getting loads of saturated fats to give yourself a double whammy. Have beans, have nuts and seeds. If you're going to have eggs as well, make sure you're going to have other elements in your diet that contain those protective phytochemicals that keep cholesterol low and overall reduce the burden of cardiovascular disease. It's really common in many dishes around the world to have eggs combined with all these other beautiful, rich phytonutrient ingredients. So huevos rancheros, our Mexican friends, that has black beans, it's got tomatoes, it's got onion, it's got chili. Beautiful combination with the eggs as well. Brazilian food, feijoada. Egyptian, ful madame. Again, fava beans. They have real richness of herbs. They have extra virgin olive oil. And yes, they have eggs as well. So this is a beautiful way of looking at the patterns of how humans have diversified their diet and combined eggs, which, yes, is a controversial food, with all these very uncontroversial foods that have those proven health benefits. I'm a big fan of getting your BBGs every single day. Beans, berries, greens, and seeds. Most of those traditional breakfasts have at least 2 or 3 of those as well. So if you're going to have eggs, that high protein, nutrient-rich ingredient, make sure you have it with all these other rich, fiber-rich and plant protein-rich ingredients too. Number 3, breakfast food, dairy. Overall, we don't entirely understand the effects of dairy foods, either positive or negative. A recent umbrella review found that total dairy consumption was linked with a decreased risk of colorectal cancer, high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, and fatal stroke, plus a possible decreased risk of breast cancer, metabolic syndrome, stroke, and type 2 diabetes. This was published in the International Journal of Food Sciences and Nutrition 2020. However, there was also some evidence for an increased risk of prostate cancer and Parkinson's disease. Overall, the authors concluded that dairy may be part of a healthy diet, but more studies are needed to better understand the potential downsides. So this is just a great example of how difficult nutrition science is to interpret. And honestly, I think it's a really good parallel for just how difficult everything is to interpret, even for individuals who are experts in their field. I think we should all take a really pragmatic approach when it comes to interpreting any headlines in particular. Our preferred types of dairy foods to consume, given all this sort of knowledge, is, and especially for breakfast, is fermented dairy, like yogurt and kefir. The reason why is because research suggests that eating fermented dairy foods can improve multiple parameters of health. And if you're looking on YouTube, I'll just pull up this very helpful diagram which looks at improved lactose tolerance, lowering cholesterol, enhancing nutrient availability. Because what we're doing with fermentation is improving the digestibility of those proteins and the sugars that you find in dairy in a similar way that fermenting does for lots of ingredients in the plant-based world and the animal-based world as well. So one of the things that a lot of people will have reported is improved lactose tolerance, because the fermentation process improves lactose digestion. There have been several human trials that demonstrated that yogurt or kefir with live active cultures significantly enhanced lactose digestion and reduced symptoms of intolerance. And this could be bloating, it could be abdominal discomfort. So if you are on the intolerant side of dairy and you don't have a full-blown allergy, it might be something to experiment with, but you'd want to be making sure that you're getting a proper fermented dairy product with live active cultures that is going to have that improvement in lactose digestion. The second thing is that it can support your gut health as well. Yogurt and other fermented dairy are renowned for their probiotic status, which improves the composition of the gut microbiota. Several human trials have also found that eating fermented milk products improved GI symptoms, including bloating, gas, abdominal discomfort, diarrhea, constipation. So potentially there is this use case for not just fermented vegetables, but also fermented dairy as well. And there was also a meta-analysis looking at longevity. It may help you live longer. In a meta-analysis of prospective cohort studies, a high intake of yogurt was associated with a lower risk of both all-cause and cardiovascular disease mortality as well. So have a look at that diagram. It basically gives you some pointers as to why fermented dairy is so useful. And you can also see this other diagram, which is a forest plot from the last study that I just mentioned about the lower risk of both all-cause and cardiovascular disease mortality as well. You'll see that it is on the cusp, so it's not, I wouldn't say it's deterministic. I still think the jury is out there. And like I said, for all of these products, whether it's oats or eggs or even red meat, it really depends on the individual. It really depends on the other aspects of your lifestyle, how much you exercise, for example, your genetics, what you've grown up eating, what you're happy to eat. So really do take this all with a pinch of salt. We've also seen consistent associations between intake of fermented milk and lower risk of colorectal cancer, type 2 diabetes, improved weight maintenance. It sounds like a massive, massive advert for fermented dairy, but really just think about it from your own perspective and whether you actually like these products as well. Like I said, they do provide probiotics, they do provide protein, and actually that protein is probably going to be more digestible as well, as are the minerals and vitamins, especially calcium and phosphorus and B vitamins. But it really does depend on the individual. So I'm a fan of dairy. Again, I don't have it every single day. I feel like you can get fermented products from mainly plants and have some of those extra benefits of probiotics and that diversity. But if you want to have some fermented dairy in your diet, then make sure you look out for those features of dairy that will prove to you that it's a good quality dairy product. Live cultures, full fat as well, because if you lower the fat, then you increase the sugar content. And if you're looking at, say, a Greek yogurt, you want that protein content to be relatively high. So it should be at least 5 grams per 100 grams, if not more. A good quality one that I use, for example, is 10 grams per 100 gram. That's a good indicator of a good quality. And you can go for labneh, you can go for fermented cheese, you could go for goats as well, because a lot of people who might be intolerant of cow's milk can actually still tolerate goats. Or you could even go for vegan. So there are fantastic coconut-based yogurts with live cultures. I love using those myself. I think they can be part of a really healthy diet that introduces those probiotics, but they do tend to be low on protein. So you have to be mindful of where you get your protein from. It's not going to have the same protein content. The same thing goes for water kefirs versus yogurt or milk-based kefirs as well. Oats, eggs, dairy, they all have pros and cons, and they can be or cannot be part of a healthy breakfast depending on how you eat them and how you source them as well. At Doctor's Kitchen, we have a general formula for eating healthy breakfasts. The ultimate trio for a balanced breakfast is one that keeps you satisfied, supports your well-being and long-term health. And these are the attributes that I try and get in at every breakfast time. Number one is protein-rich foods. I love to get protein in first thing in the morning. It can be eggs, but it can also be beans. It could be yogurt. It could be nuts, seeds, nut butter. The reason why is because it keeps you feeling satisfied, energy, fuller for longer. And it's linked to, like I said, better satiety, better glycemic control, so better control of your blood sugar, muscle mass. Protein consumption at breakfast revealed potential health benefits by increasing muscle mass across 5 different studies involving an elderly population. You're not going to build muscle alone by just having protein. You do have to exercise, but it is a very, very important component as well. So think about Greek yogurt, think about nut butter, think about all those different ingredients that are high in protein. The second thing is healthy fats. So this is why I'm a big fan of nuts and seeds, or seeds and nuts, because I like to say BBGs, and the S stands for seeds and nuts. Avocado, oily fish, they have the anti-inflammatory ingredients that will, again, improve inflammation levels, reduce the likelihood of cardiovascular disease, dementia, and they can mitigate against other pro-inflammatory elements in the human body, like visceral fat as well. So I always try and get healthy fats in the diet. They're also very satiating, and they can also contain a mixture of different macronutrients like protein as well that ticks the first box. So nuts and seeds, avocado. Avocado is less high in the protein, but oily fish definitely is. And I also try and get fiber from fruits, vegetables, and seeds. It basically sounds like I'm describing a diversity bowl. That's basically what I have for breakfast. It is a great way to just tick so many different elements off your daily BBGs list, your daily beans, berries, greens, and seeds every single day. It's a great way of just ticking off first thing in the morning. That way, you're going to feel satiety. You're not going to have those cravings. You're going to feel like you've achieved something straight away first thing in the morning. And it means that you're going to be less likely to succumb to those cravings that unfortunately will creep in, not just because of the roller coaster of our blood sugar, but also because of the roller coaster of our stress response during the day as well. So there you have it. That is my roundup of breakfast foods: oats, dairy, eggs. Hopefully that has given you a lot more clarity. If there are other breakfast foods that you want me to do a deep dive in, let me know in the comments in YouTube or on Twitter. DM me on social media. I'm more than happy to get back to you and do a dive into some of these other elements. And also, we're going to be doing a lot more stuff in the kitchen where I literally go through brands that I do like and ones that I like less, but ultimately the choice is up to you. I really hope this has been helpful. And if you start the day right, everything else flows. Eat well, and I'll see you again in the Doctor's Kitchen. If you liked that episode, you will absolutely love this episode I did right here with Dr. Mindy Pelz. We talk about fasting, the benefits of fasting, as well as specifically what women need to know about fasting. You can check it out right now by clicking on the link.